Hello there folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel, a place where I discuss different topics and subjects, provide answers based on my wisdom from different sources that I have seen, and I provide people with answers to questions they might find difficult to answer, or they're more probably not ready to answer, or they just want a different possible interpretation. Now, I do want to remind people that everything I present is, you know, part of my own experience, so don't rush in taking whatever I say for granted. Now, the question for today is one that I found on Quora. It's quite an interesting question, like how can I actually control my emotions? This is a very good question nowadays, but the problem is this question stems from a misunderstanding of emotions. Okay, the big problem with emotions is that most people don't understand that you don't simply control emotions. Okay, emotions are not here to be controlled. Emotions are here to be manifested, or they are just here to be felt. The point about emotions is just they are just a representative of what you are, what you feel like, and well, what you have taken from others. Because in many situations your emotions aren't even yours. Okay, you have to understand that emotion is nothing else than emotion, okay? Energy in motion. I have explained in previous videos of mine that every gesture, everything that you manifest is technically like a burst of energy, okay? Like a shockwave of energy that goes away from you. And as it spreads, the point is you also, I can't say in fact, but you also influence other people. That's how you can feel, especially if you're empathic enough, or if you are open enough towards yourself and therefore towards others as well. You are capable of at least subconsciously feeling how other people feel like. Okay, it's something that we do emotionally. Animals can also do that, but usually they do that by studying your chemistry, right? The dog does that by smelling you. The cat can look at you and feel certain things. The snake usually use their tongue to pick up chemicals from the air, and they can simply and genuinely feel how you are, probably even better than what you feel, because well, that's what animals do day in day out, right? We have been taught in a way, directly and indirectly by society, to simply stray away from this from all these points. Okay, no longer being capable of understanding things because we have been ignoring all these aspects regarding how to read other people. Now, just because someone is smiling, for example, it doesn't mean that they're actually happy. Okay, so emotions are something that you put out because of a certain situation. Okay, but emotion is nothing else than a reaction to that situation. Okay, you have a certain situation. Okay, and if you don't react to it, namely you come up with a response, right, a defense mechanism, which is usually the case, and defense mechanisms are nothing else than a survival instinct. Okay, because the problem is, can't call it actually a problem, but to some people it can actually be, we end up having a lot of stories in the back of our mind, stories that we take from children, from other children as we play with them when we are young, and usually from parents, from school, society in general, because there's a lot of programming that goes into our heads when we are very young. And when you create a certain idea, okay, towards something, it's called an attachment. Okay, when you create an attachment, when you give sense, when you give meaning to something, technically you are creating a limitation, because meaning is a limitation. Instead of accepting something for the totality, right, for the whole that it can be, you're simply viewing it as inside the box. Okay, when you give a meaning to something, you're simply disregarding it, at least to yourself, from being anything else that can be. Like, if you actually need to go in a park or anywhere you would go, you don't need to call the objects that you see by their name. Most people at least subconsciously do that because they are attached to the meanings that they have received, right? Some people will actually call you mad if you call an object some other way. To me, concepts and words are concepts. They are just irrelevant. I can simply go somewhere and admire everything that is around me just because it is there. I don't need to call it any name, because if you call a tree some other way, it's just gonna mind its own business. You're not gonna change anything. Just like if you eat dog food, you're not going to become a dog, right? Just like if you call a cat some way else, it's not going to change its shape, right? So all this being said, the point about emotion is that you're only ending up as creating all these stories, right? Because the mind is only an engine of creation. The mind can only create, that's the point. The mind cannot be shut down as many people would like. The only way to shut down the mind is, well, when you actually perish, okay? That's the only moment when the mind will shut down. And it's been scientifically proven that when you go to sleep, your mind is even more hyperactive, okay? Now, why did I say hyperactive? Is because we have been trained to do so much mess with our mind. Technically, school is the main culprit, because when you go to school each and every day, like for 5 days in a week, you go to school, you have 4, 5, 6 subjects, and each subject is different. So technically you're kind of becoming a machine, right? You're a state machine. You're now doing physics, then you're doing maths, right? You're technically switching from one stance to another, right? I actually had a quote a short while ago in which, like a little epiphany that told me everything is a state machine. You can only do one thing at a certain time, right? And that is a state machine. Your emotional system is a state machine as well, because you can only feel usually one emotion at the same time. You're only happy or you're sad or whatever. Now, the reason why you feel emotions is, well, there can actually be several reasons. Usually emotions are nothing else, as I said, than a burst of energy, okay? Every gesture that is done is like a burst of energy that impregnates literally everything around it. You have to understand that every object, everything that lives around you, okay, has its own memory. A table, for example, has emotional memory as well, because if you manifest anger close to that table, it's gonna take a long while, okay? That table is gonna absorb that anger. It's gonna take a long while for that anger to be, to dissipate, because everything dissipates. Energy, when you put it out, okay, it's like unfulfilled ideas, okay? Because your anger, your happiness, in most situations, especially negative, lower quality, lower vibrational emotions, okay, they are like unfulfilled thoughts, okay? They are not fulfilled, okay? They are just like, you have an excess of energy and you're putting it away, right? Just like a volcano, it has an excess of lava and it's throwing it out, right? So the point about this is, all these ideas, okay, unfulfilled ideas, will always seek to become pure, okay, will always seek to become still, okay, because not being fulfilled means they don't have a purpose, so they seek to become one with creation again, and they can only achieve this through dissipation. Now, as they dissipate, okay, for example, even after the people have died, okay, as energy dissipates, some strange phenomena can happen, yes, but okay, let's not discuss about this, okay? The point about this is very simple. As energy dissipates, okay, you may actually come in contact with it. If you go into places where certain things are done again and again and again, like, well-known neighborhoods or areas in your town, for example, where there's a lot of corruption, there is a lot of crime, okay, you will pick up some bad vibes. Most likely you won't manifest them by the moment, right? But you will manifest them sooner or later, because emotion, when you take that in, and you always take that in because everything that your aura interacts with may actually take it in, okay? And emotion is nothing else than a memory, okay? It's a piece of data, okay? Anger, happiness, they are just reactions to something, right? Like someone cracks a joke, you laugh, right? If you understand the joke, right, you laugh, right? That's a reaction to something. If you learn to simply take everything non-conceptually, okay, without any meaning, because that's technically how life should be lived, everything kind of shouldn't have any meaning, because nothing actually has any meaning, okay? A normal person doesn't see meaning in things, and that's how I actually feel. I feel that nothing actually has a feeling, okay? And someone actually told that everything that I see around is nothing else than a vehicle. It is something that I use to make my life better, okay? We as humans can live as well even without money, for example, but money allows us to do certain things much faster, okay? Technically, you can also live better even without most of your friends, right? But there again are some vehicles. You use those vehicles and you also become a vehicle to those people, okay? Because you're sharing some emotions, right? You're discussing things, and as you discuss things, right, you're programmed by life, society, and everything, right, to share some emotions, which is also logically correct, right? Like, you need to have a talk, you need to, have that friend that's feeling bad, and, you know, you're gonna lend your shoulder, right, so that they can actually, discharge a bit of their negativity. You know, people kind of do this, or at least they used to. So you see, nowadays with this idea of social distancing, like, social distancing is such a dumb term, like it's an oxymoron or whatever you call it. It's like, how can you be social and distant at the same time, right? This reminds of a story of Stanislaw Lem, I think, or I don't know, I don't remember the author, okay? But the short story is a sci-fi story, and it's about an emperor who simply no longer wanted his subjects to be discussing, because they had a fear that their subjects are talking badly about him. So he came with an ingenious idea. He created a ring, actually an ear ring, okay, and all his subjects were forced to wear that ear ring, right? Just like kind of we are forced nowadays to wear a face mask. Now, what's the point about this? Well, the ear ring actually had uranium in it, and probably, as you may know or not, uranium is a highly volatile substance. You can't have too much of it in the same place because it goes boom, and it actually makes a big boom. So, after, probably, the story doesn't say, but after some casualties, most likely, people have learned that, or they probably knew from the beginning, and the story ends with two subjects keeping a very great distance, okay, while communicating, right? It's like in the old times when people would communicate, one would be on a mountain, the other tribe on another mountain, and they would use different fire signs, right? And they would make smoke, and they would communicate through that smoke, right? It's kind of like that, right? It's social distancing, like, it's like distancing, okay? It's not social. If you just look at society, there is nothing social. Like nowadays, if I go to a place, okay, like let's say I go to a pub, I see youngsters. They get all together. There are like 4, 5, 6 of those, but each one is glued with their eyes in their phone, right? So what kind of socializing is that? That is actually an example of social distancing, okay? Because those people are actually close together, but they're distant one from the other because everyone is minding their own business. I actually happened to meet with such people that they would be glued to their phone, and they would ask me questions, but their mind was literally all the place, right? But that wasn't a problem, okay? Those persons like that, I accepted them in my life because, well, we actually had somewhat of a good relationship, and people can have bad days, and they become self-ignorant, so simply they will ignore others as well. You have to understand that you cannot control emotions, because emotions are nothing else than a reaction. Technically, they are nothing else than a bit of code, okay? They're just nothing else than memory. There are people who are very empathetic. There are people who are very sensitive, okay? They are very sensitive to this, and they are capable of picking these up. We have people again with psychic powers, okay? Well, don't think about X-Men or something like that necessarily, but we all have innate psychic abilities, okay? And some people have these abilities that are latent, yes, but they have a very great potential, and if they go into a certain room, right, they can easily pick the vibe of that room. They don't need to speak with any person in there, okay? Because usually a certain room is a place where kind of people gather and do the same thing. Like in a bar, there's always gonna be the same things, right? Like there can be, let's say, 10 different things that can happen, and probably not each and every day the same things will happen. Probably one thing will not be done today, but it will be done the next 3 days, right? So the same emotions will impregnate the walls, the jars, the tables, and the such. And even if you wash them, okay, that memory is partly taken away when you take a shower. That is why you feel so refreshed, especially if you do a cold shower, because everything that impregnates you, okay? When someone yells at you and says bad things about you, you feel bad because technically you have accepted their code inside you, right? You have accepted their anger and their problems as if they were your own. You see, that's a problem. People have been taught to react to things, and when you react to things, you actually accept them. When someone comes and yell at you that they have a problem, you don't even know that person, right? You react to them. It's a it's a story that you're creating, that if someone else yells at you, your whole life would be a mess. That's technically the story, and you're propagating it again and again. And the next time a person comes to you, there's all these freeloaders, as they're called. They just come, they dump their shit on you, and then they happily move away because, well, they found another sucker to dump their negativity on. There are a lot of these people. You just have to understand the situation, right? Some people have problems. In 99% of the situation, you don't have any implication in that. So long as you don't have any implication, there is no need to accept other people's problems. Other people's problems are not yours, and your problems are not other people's, right? It's as easy as that. Usually the truth nowadays is made to feel like it's this super elaborate, over scientific thing, but it's always something very simple, okay? Like, it's always like, on this planet water freezes at a certain temperature, okay? Well, science says that it's 0 degrees. Technically it's -4 because water has a lot of salt, has a lot of impurities, and depending on your water specimen, right, the amount of water that you have, it can actually freeze sooner or later. Let's not dive into too many technicalities. So the point about this, the amount of information that we know, this is also in many situations a story, right? And your belief systems, okay, your belief system, which means actually a belief is nothing else than accepting things without fighting against them, right? Without a need for proof. That's actually what a belief is. And if you don't believe me, just look around. The news says something, most of the population of the world just listens to that. Do they sound like they actually need some proof? Well, the question is, do you actually find some proof on television other than some manufactured lies or something like that? So the question is, why would you want to control your emotions, right? If you want to control your emotions, there's nothing wrong about this. You're just waking up. You're just realizing that you're a mess. Because most people are a mess. That's what society makes out of you. And especially school, right? And most likely your family as well. Don't take this necessarily as something bad. We all have to experience different things in life because that's how we grow our spiritual wisdom. And the point about this is, people aren't taught, and like ever since now, I doubt, like, people haven't been taught how to handle their mind, right? How to handle their emotions. And a society that wants you to be overly active, right? Because everything is a distraction nowadays. Video games, drugs, cigars, technically everything is used by people as a drug activity, as I call it, because they're using that to escape what they call negative in this world, right? You can see that society is so sick because no one wants to live in this society. So many people commit suicide, so many people prefer getting drugged so that they experience anything else in this world. So many people get addicted to all sorts of things, right? It is a completely sick society. That is why everything is falling down nowadays. So your emotions are nothing else than a reaction, okay? And a reaction is triggered by one of your stories, right? You have been angered, you have been fooled, you have been, pissed off by a lot of people, and you have to understand that people who anger you are actually people who control you, because anger is a way of control. Why do you think there is so much negativity in the news nowadays? Fear is a way to control, and anger is a way to control, because when you anger people, you're already building them stories so that, by believing those stories, they're actually controlled in a way, because if you build stories in the mind of people, you are technically building their realities, because stories create realities. If you create a certain belief that, I don't know, you suck, for example, because that's one of the things school and probably your parents, especially people who haven't achieved anything significant in their lives, they will always tell you that you are never good enough, for example. And social media also teach you that indirectly, because you're always going to see digital narcissists who post fake lives, and you're gonna say, hey, I'm not good enough, I don't have enough subscribers, right? It's always your ego that's gonna say, hey, you are never good enough, right? And the ego is nothing else than what you have built. Okay, the ego is not something bad. You have to understand the ego is one of the most ancient constructs. Okay, but well, I don't remember if I actually did a video on that, but the ego is not something bad. Okay, when your ego triggers, it's just a reminder that there are loads of rubbish in your mind that you have to take care of. So your emotions, they're not something that you have to control, right? The thing that you have to control is how you react to certain things. And in order to no longer react, you actually have to learn how to control your mind. But you don't have to control things, because the only reason you seek control is because you don't have it. And seeking control is a means of survival, which is one of the lowest vibrations. You only want control when you want survival, because you want control when you are insecure, when you don't trust yourself, right? When you are very, distrustful of people, right? I'm actually missing that word. That word is skipping my mind for some reason, but you know, suspecting, right? When you are suspecting people of things, right? Only the fool suspects others, right? Only the dumb person suspects others, because in order for you to suspect something, right, you have to not know the situation. If you don't know a situation, anything can be possible, right? It has always been throughout the world, and that's why we have so many superstitions, right? Because not knowing what that thing was, okay, people have been giving too much brain power, right? Too much attention to the brain and to the mind, because there's this desperation towards control, right? Everyone wants to control. Science is nothing else than control. It's a feeble attempt to understand things, and unfortunately, especially things that shouldn't be understood. Because understanding, okay, means perceiving something only with your mind. You have to understand that overstanding is the way to go, because overstanding means perceiving something as a whole, right? With your whole body, with your whole being, with your whole psyche, with your whole spirit, right? It has to be perceived beyond the mind, because the mind belongs to this body. Once you discarnate, right? Once you leave the body, there's gonna be no more memory to you, because everything that you have stored in the brain remains in the brain, and the brain belongs to this body that you're gonna ditch sooner or later when you perish. Okay, we all pass away sooner or later, and you're gonna ditch all those memories, right? Once you become discarnate, there's no more memory for you, because your mind is only capable of discernment while you are in here, right? While you are in here, you can only be you can be discerning, and you can be logical, because the logical mind belongs to this body. It belongs to this universe. Sure, it can belong to any other universe, but in order to experience a universe, you need a specific body, right? Just like in order to play a video game, you need a character, right? Which is nothing else than a moving camera. That's technically what a player is, a moving camera, a moving angle, right? And in this life, which is also a video game, in this life you're again nothing else than a video camera. And you're a video camera for intelligence itself, right? What we call consciousness, but it's more like intelligence itself, okay? That which exists beyond limitation, right? Beyond the code of life, right? Which is actually intelligence, right? The entire code of existence, right? That which allows creation to put, the createes into existence. So you have to understand that throughout your life you have created your own stories, and you have been pulling on other people's stories consciously and or subconsciously, so that as you have been draining these ideas into you, you have been feeding them, and that is one reason why you're feeling constantly tired, because you're constantly feeding these stories. In order to understand what your stories are, always challenge your beliefs. Ask yourself why you're doing that, okay? And you will see that you will find different stories, right? And go through those stories in an objective way, right? Like you fear spiders because, well, whatever reason, but the reason is a story, right? You're afraid that they might bite you, okay? There might be some ancestral fear, because your DNA actually holds the whole history of the universe, right? And you actually have in your DNA the fear of any prey before you that was trapped by a spider, right? One of the reasons why bondage, for example, as a fetish is so delightful, because there is always a part of the mind that extracts pleasure out of pain, right? Or the fear of something that can actually happen, right? Because that's the point of such fetishes. Okay, what can happen, not necessarily what will. Okay, that's the idea of the fantasy, right? So the point about emotions is find your stories that you have been creating. Okay, and once you become capable of holding your mind still instead of constantly switching from one thing to another, okay, this is hyperactivity. This is actually damaging the brain. Is one of the leading causes of Alzheimer, because Alzheimer comes from an abuse of your mind. And school does that because school ruins children's imagination. Always switching from one subject to another, from one problem to another, that's destroying your brain. Okay, it's destroying your inner equilibrium, because you can no longer think for yourself. And it also teaches, society also teaches you that whatever you have to do, if it fails, you have to try even harder. Why not actually do the opposite, right? Like everything in this society is taught in reverse. You have to understand this. This is one of the deepest lessons that I can teach you, at least in this video, right? Feel free to watch my other videos if you're interested. So the point about this is when things are in reverse, okay, because the truth can only be experienced. You can only experience the truth, you cannot learn the truth, because if someone would tell you the truth and you're not ready for it, you're gonna watch any other way, right? Or you're gonna fall asleep, right? Or you're gonna laugh in their faces. Probably you've been through this if you were the only awake person around and everyone was stead asleep, right? Or sleeping like a log in the so-called Matrix, right? The point about this is they wouldn't be listening to you, okay, when you would tell them something beyond their comprehension or beyond their level of readiness. So find your stories and learn how to keep a still mind. Every time you find a difficulty, learn to step back and watch the situation objectively. Do some sort of meditation. Meditation is all about letting your thoughts go, through your mind, and just watch them. Because whatever thoughts you have in your mind, they are nothing else than, how to put it, they're nothing else than proof of what you have been feeding your mind with. You've been feeding your mind with all sorts of shit, all sorts of gibberish. Well, that's what your mind is gonna be creating, right? The mind is just an engine of creation. It cannot do anything else but create. And if you don't teach your mind to create things that actually help you, your mind will be producing all sorts of things based on what you have subconsciously drawn. And as I've said, the body has enormous memory, so even when you speak to someone, even when you shake hands with someone, you're taking some memory from them and they are taking something from you. If you are a highly sensitive person, you might actually start even having dreams that the other person had. It can actually happen. Chances are very small, but it can actually happen. All this being said, hopefully I opened your eyes a bit more. I'm gonna quit this video here because I want my videos to spark the flame of curiosity, instead of just giving some plain answers that people most likely will take for granted. All this being said, become more introspective and see that everything can be solved one way or another. Take care of yourselves, enjoy life, and all I can say is you are loved and appreciated. Whatever you are doing is the best you can at the right pace for you. If you like the type of content that I'm creating, feel free to like and subscribe. Feel free to share this with others, direct people to their YouTube channels. Direct me to your YouTube channel so that I can learn from you. Direct other people to mine so we can together raise the awareness of people, because that's exactly the only pandemic in the world, which is ignorance. We are suffering from a pandemic of ignorance, which means a lack of education, right? All things considered, take care of yourself. You are loved and appreciated. Again, Ferenc Can Board signing out.